Hi, I'm Michelle Shingler, the editor-in-chief of Foreword Reviews. Welcome to Petit Foreword, our bite-sized interviews with indie authors. Today we're speaking with Meg Ripley, whose novel Necrology released on September 24th. It's a subversive, thrilling story in which a girl raised on the wonders of the wilds is forced to contend with those who would see her kind extinguished. Meg, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
I'm happy to be here.
So, the world of the dirty and the Freeman is marked by its own singular vocabulary. Can you talk a bit about the process of conceptualizing and wielding the language you use in necrology? How did you find yourself thinking and speaking in dirty terms outside of the world of the book?
You know, I'd say overall, no, yes and no. I would say that some of those terms are just my natural vernacular every day. I might say we're not having macaroni and cheese to my kids. I might say it's not in the stars, or I might talk about the wilds of Brooklyn. But I wanted to make sure that the term dirty could be reclaimed as a point of pride for women because it's normally referring to something that's morally a downfall. I think that the reclamation of that felt important to me. And then for the Freeman, I would say, it's definitely referring to a certain contingent of America who are preoccupied with retaining the rights to their civil liberties, but they're definitely picking and choosing which civil liberties they're looking to protect. So overall, this demographic might wear a t-shirt that says live free or die, but also and be maybe worried about their right to bear arms, but aren't taking into consideration maybe what's on the flip side of that ballot, which is his wife or daughter's access to health care, and their rights to the future they want.
Yes. And there are such powerful reclamations all throughout it. Um, can you speak a little bit about the unbreakable link that women like Whitetail Rabbit and their ancestors feel to the natural world and about what makes that magic?
Yes, for that, they're definitely in tune with the earth. It's not just their religion, it's not just their spirituality, it's actually their entire identity. And I think it's something that's important to them because it has to do with the idea of the wilds. In the book, the wilds referred are the nature is referred to as the wilds, and I think that naming the wilds was actually in reference to sort of a law of the jungle, sort of a natural government of the planet. And I think that these women are especially attuned to it because not only are they appreciative to it because it's bestowed such incredible power to them, it's seen them as worthy and um, as as objects that are allowed and entitled to such power.
Mhm.
But also, it's something that it's a government that predates the patriarchy. So
Mhm.
overall, it's something that they can trust.
Yeah.
It's not sort of caught up in either institution, tradition, or some myopic view of the world, or um, a self-serving person in power.
Necrology is set in an alternate version of American history, but there are still clear connections. You've already discussed some of them between the restrictions and misogyny that its women experience and those that are experienced by women in our recent history. What lessons do you hope that people take from Whitetail and Rabbit's willingness to stand up to systemic misogyny at really great personal risk?
You know, when I think about rabbit and whitetail and the risks that they take, I mean, it's definitely not something they jump into lightly. They jump into it almost reluctantly at certain points. And I think, we as Americans could say, we could be complacent and say, look how far we've come, or, we could say it's not my fight, or we can say, I'm comfortable with the way things are. I think overall, until in society there's a tipping point, um, there's usually typically no action because as the book sort of points to multiple times, it asks the question, when is a good time for a revolution? And
Mhm.
the answer, of course, is never, because it's never a convenient time for a revolution. But day by day, if we can't acknowledge that our rights and privileges are actually being chiseled away at,
Mhm.
um, we can be blindsided by things. So I think if Whitetail and Rabbit were here today, they would probably suggest that we should go vote.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so many of the book's villains are men who fear women's magic, who have this like inborn fear of it. But there are also women who participate, women like Miss Andrews who help them along. What do you think drives such women to commit ultimate betrayals against their sisters and themselves?
I wish that I knew exactly why, but I mean, I have some ideas why it happens.
Mhm,
When I think about society and archetypes that are presented for women to fall into in society, they're pretty limited overall.
mhm,
You have mothers, wives, and then on the flip side of that, you might have uber religious slash nun, or you might have whore. And
yeah,
falling outside of those things gets uncomfortable for conventional society.
mhm,
Being deemed as other is scary, and seeing another is can be scary. When I think of Mrs. Andrews, I think of her upbringing
mhm,
staunchly. Her upbringing is staunchly Freeman. She
mhm,
has grown up in a very cold environment, and at one point, she does dabble in the dirt, and it's catastrophic for her. In fact, she's left in the gutter, left for dead, and has nothing but grief. Along
yeah,
comes her future husband to raise her up in society, the Alpha, Freeman Alpha, Andrew Sr., um, puts her in a place of society, gives her a purpose, mother, wife, and that community has been her salvation. It's her entire identity. So not only is she scared of the times when she went outside of her comfort zone, but also she's been reinforced by everything that's come since. And I think about outsiders in general. And I'm not even talking about so outside the frame of typical female, but, when we look at, say, a waitress in a restaurant, she's 50 something, childless, husbandless, goes home to her cat. And we might actually look at her and say, wow, what went wrong there?
mhm,
That's not successful. That's not flourishing because the 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 identifiers of what success means to be female in
yeah,
our society are so rigid that
mhm,
we can't acknowledge the fact that she's single by choice, childless
mhm,
by choice, has found family in the restaurant in her community, and loves her cat, has a complete the life she chooses.
yeah,
um, so I think until society is ready to accept what female identity is, it will always be trying to pivot to redirect us into what normal feels like.
yeah. That's a really empathetic and nuanced way to look at it, and I really appreciate that. Um, you have all of these wonderful characters in your book. Who do you identify the most with and why?
I would say certainly whitetail because, and it's not just because I am a mom. I am a mom, but I feel sympathetic toward a lot of moms around the world who are in more war torn areas. I don't think any mom would willingly volunteer her child for the revolution. No one wants their kid to be the soldier. No one wants to put their child at risk. Um, Whitetail definitely wants to keep her kids safe, and in fact, is sort of like is holding them so close to prevent the inevitable that it's their it ruins them all. But I think even in my own household, when I think about raising my kids, the same as Whitetail, you teach your kids to be their biggest, baddest, best selves, of course.
Yeah,
And yet, when they go out, you say maybe a little less lip gloss, or maybe that skirt is a little too short, or you do wind up editing their
mhm,
self-expression,
mhm,
not because you don't love them and think they're incredible, but because you can't trust the outside world to not cut them down or mistreat them. You can't necessarily keep them safe in the outside world, which is, it's sort of maddening because it's a conundrum, right? Because we want
mhm,
them to flourish and be their biggest, baddest selves, but at the end of the day, we got to keep them safe.
yeah. So this is the first book in a series. What's next for Rabbit and the Journey in their fight against the Freeman?
You know, the knee jerk reaction for that is actually to want to have the revolution. Well, the back cover of book one promises the revolution, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the want is to have a big fight, lots of blood, rabbit to win, and be king slash queen of the world. And but ultimately, the dirty are pacifists. When we're talking about revolution, we're talking about one side winning and one side losing. And these are not a people that are preoccupied with removing power from anyone. What they're
Mhm.
asking for is a seat at the table,
Mhm.
a seat at the decision in their own and autonomy in their decision making. And I think that, the learning curve or the character arc, I suppose, of book two is going to be recognizing that patriarchy turned matriarchy is actually the same thing. And
Yeah.
ultimately, what we're looking for is representation. We're looking for women and minorities in seats of power, not taking power. And so that's what I'm focused on. When having written book two, that's where my brain is at. There's definitely a lot of surprises, though.
That's really exciting, and we can't wait to see that. To our audience, you get this book now. It's on shelves right now. Run out and get it. And to Meg, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me.